right, today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite shows that's on TV right now, and that is For All Mankind. Just as a warning, I am going to spoil everything through season 3 in this video. I just watched the last episode of season 3 yesterday, so if you don't want to be spoiled, you should skip this until after you've watched all those episodes. For All Mankind is what I would call an alternative history show. The basic premise is that what if instead of the Americans landing first on the moon, it was the Russians? That is what happens in the first episode of the first season. And then the main thrust of the plot throughout the rest of the seasons and the episodes is that if this were to happen, America would basically have a fire lit under its ass, and it would have spurred a lot more innovation in space travel and just technology in general. And some examples in the first season, you see them going to the moon, you see them establishing a base on the moon, with moon travel becoming kind of a regular thing. And then when you get to season 3, at the beginning of season 3, they fast forwarded a few decades, and they are now on Mars, and it's only the mid-90s. And I've heard a lot of people say that this show is a little bit of a slow burn, that the first few episodes of the first season are a little bit slow, and that it takes a while to ramp up. And I agree that this is true, but just with, how into sci-fi and dramas that I am, I just really like the show overall. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about season 3, and let's start with the positives. The first one is that I think it's just really cool to see this alternative history of the world. It's really just fun to imagine what could things have been like if things had played out differently. I really do think that if the Russians had won the race to the moon initially, that we might be living in a very different reality today. And so from that aspect, I think that the show's main premise is somewhat believable. And it's just really fun to see in this version of the world, Bill Clinton lost the election and stuff like that. As part of that alternative history, I think what is also really cool is this whole idea of the private industry starting to really push space exploration forward, kind of competing with NASA and other governmental organizations. And it really parallels what's happening with SpaceX right now. But again, just a couple decades earlier, this takes place in the mid-90s. I think what is also cool is some of the science and some of the, I'll call it alternative science, because a lot of these things don't currently exist today. There's this whole kind of plot line throughout all the seasons that they have actually, in this alternative version of the reality, solved nuclear fusion. Right now, this is a thing that scientists are thinking about, and I don't know all the details, but it's not seen really as a fully viable kind of way of producing energy right now. But in the show, they somehow solved that, which allows all this space travel and just really clean energy. And then they have this really cool stuff, at one point, one of the ships going to Mars puts out this huge solar sail, and I just think that's a really cool idea. And if you really want to dig in and nerd out, actually you go to the Apple TV app and they have these kind of behind the scenes featurettes on some of the science behind the show, which I highly recommend. Okay, so you got the cool science, and then one other thing I really like about the show is the character of Dev Ayesa. He is the head of Helios, which is the private space company in the show that is also going to Mars. And if you read kind of some of the behind the scenes in the show, and I think this is also touched in the show somewhat, he was one of the 2 people to actually crack nuclear fusion in the show. So he's this kind of Elon Musk-esque character, which I think just is a cool parallel to today's reality. And for me, the fact that he is cast as a black man is also just really good to see. Normally this would be kind of a white man or something, but it's cool that they chose this way of going forward. And of course, like I said, he's sort of an Elon Musk character. He's not necessarily an admirable character that, you're supposed to aspire to be like, but I still like the representation aspect of this, and there's, parts of that character that I feel like I can look up to. Okay, so another thing I liked about the show is this whole idea of this 3-way space race between the NASA, Helios, and the Russians. There's some really cool back and forth, and each of the different kind of groups one-upping themselves. And then again, the moment when the whole solar sail is kind of expanded, I think is really cool. And then finally, I just like some of the actual drama of the show and some of the kind of more serious and emotional moments. I'll touch on this again in the criticism section as well. But a lot of this, I think, works for me and at least emotionally impacted me during the show. Now, there's this whole thing with this character, Danny, who is the son of a couple of the astronauts in the previous seasons, and his whole downward spiral, and his kind of affair with Karen, and then sabotaging sort of the water pumping operation on Mars, and this kind of mental downward spiral, and getting hooked to painkillers or whatever it is. It stretches the constraints of what I think would actually happen, but I found it somewhat entertaining and somewhat gripping to watch. And then there's also some moments that actually, really moved me. I think when President Ellen Wilson comes out as gay, I'm not gonna lie, it was, kind of contrived, but I didn't really expect her to come out in that moment. And then the whole back and forth with kind of the black astronaut who had also come out, that's on Mars right now, and then the Russian guy who was like homophobic is like, yes, you're my friend now. Like, you know, all of that, again, you know, kind of contrived, but works for me. So overall, lots to like about the show. I think it is just a pretty entertaining ride. Okay, let's get to the criticisms. And I will say that my one main criticism is of one of the positives, and that is kind of the drama. It's a double-edged sword for me. I think a lot of the drama is compelling and interesting to watch, but it's like there's so much of it, and there's like so many like open threads that get started, but then don't really go anywhere. And some of it, again, I would say kind of stretches the bounds of like what's really believable. It just seems like a lot, and at some points I wonder if it's drama for drama's sake. Because when you think about it, you know, by the end of the last episode of the third season, you have so many like threads going. You have all this stuff with Danny. You have all this stuff with like President Ellen Wilson and like her getting back together with her girlfriend. You have like the bombing of the Space Center and characters dying, and I don't really know quite what motivated those characters to even do this bombing. Not really believable, but it's just another like element of shock value. You have this random North Korean dude like showing up on Mars. You know, you have Kelly being pregnant and needing to like get off the planet to have her baby, and then like having her, you know, strapped to the front of this rocket and then like flying through space the rest of the way to get to the space station. You have them exiling Danny after all of his mistakes and putting him into like North Korean's capsule. And you have like Margot Madison getting like investigated by the FBI, ended up being, you know, living in Russia at the end. So you have like so much stuff going on and so many open threads, and like a lot of it is compelling, but it's just a lot. All right, so how do I feel about this season of TV overall? I'll say I like it a lot. You know, there's kind of this underlying theme of exploration and bravery and self-sacrifice, and I think the show does a good job of going through all of that, having some good drama, having some good kind of, you know, things to imagine about this alternative reality and some of the science behind it. There's a lot of drama. I don't know if it all lands or is really wrapped up, but again, I think it's a good package overall. So for this season, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I will for sure be watching the next season. Okay, so that'll do it for this video. If you like this video, hit the like button, which will help others find it, and subscribe for more. Peace.